and welcome to this edition of Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm Assemblymember Harvey Epstein of the 74th Assembly District, and today I'll be talking with Ravi Ragbir from the New Sanctuary Coalition and Kaji Dousa, Chief of Staff of State Senator Brian Benjamin, about the separation of children and their families and the bill New York communities and faith leaders are vocally supporting, the SCAR Act. It's a conversation worth exploring. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you, Harvey.
So let's talk a little about how the SCAR Act got started and the history behind it. Ravi, can you let us know the history here?
Sure. About a year ago, when this administration decided that they were going to have a zero tolerance policy about the border and about the people who are coming in, they took the drastic step of separating the parents from the children. So children were being kept in other centers separate from their mothers. And that wasn't the only wrong thing that was happening. What was also happening is that even when the parents were able to get released, they were not able to reunite with their kids because they didn't know where the kids were being held, and two, the administration was literally blocking the reunification of their parents with their kids. So the reason why we got involved is that is terrible. That is horrific that you can deliberately separate your children from their families. And I reached out to you and to State Senator Benjamin about why we need to get involved. And we started a protest at the Cayuga Center in Harlem to highlight the issue. And you all actually worked with us on doing a legislative act to stop this.
So, Kaji, tell us what motivated Senator Benjamin to get involved in this, and tell us a little about the SCAR Act and what it's trying to do.
Sure, absolutely. So the SCAR Act stands for Separated Children Accountability Response Act. And so I think that when we hear about all of the injustices that are happening on a national level, sometimes we can't connect it to what's happening on a very local, state level, what's happening in our community. And so the senator represents Senate District 30, and the Cayuga Center is within that district. And the Cayuga Center is a nonprofit agency that was actually accepting some of the children who were separated from their parents via the...
Hundreds of children went to Cayuga, right?
Right, hundreds of children. And so the senator just felt that, this is happening within, my district, this is happening within our state, and so how can we utilize state power to help bring transparency to this issue and to help push with the reunification of children. And so as Ravi said, you and the senator worked very hard and thought long and hard about it, and so the SCAR Act, that's how it came to be. And so basically what it does is that on a state level, it requires nonprofit agencies who are accepting separated children, whether they were accompanied or not, to provide reporting data to the state so that we can understand who the children are within our state, what their needs are, and is the federal government actually abiding by what they're saying by actually reunifying children.
What Kaji is saying is, what Kaji mentioned, but we need to clarify to our viewers, is this was a federal policy. Which means locally, we at the city or the state couldn't get involved. And what we found out, what has happened is there was a dark hole. No one was getting information about anything at the federal level. So in creating the SCAR Act, you are literally finding a way to have access to what is happening.
Yeah. So what you're saying is there's information that our state providers have because they're using a federal contract. So how do we get that information from them? What are the methods in the SCAR Act?
So within the SCAR Act itself, it requires reporting duties by these nonprofit agencies to state government, to state actors. So it would say, this is how many children who were separated that we received, this is their demographics, and this is how many that have been reunified, with their family. So it gets to the heart of the issue, making sure that there's transparency as it relates to this inhumane policy and making sure, creating a mechanism that helps to reunify.
Well, I've heard people say, well, we don't need this anymore because those children now have been reunified and this there's no need for this. So what's your response to someone who would say the SCAR Act is outdated and not necessary anymore?
I would say that with this administration that we're under now, with the Trump administration, we just on a day-to-day basis, we just don't know what will happen. I feel like we reach new levels of lows, new levels of inhumanity as it relates to policies and different things like that. And so this policy was created in the secrecy of night, right? So when when the senator went and spoke to the executive director of the Cayuga Center, he said that the federal government didn't even tell them that the children that they were receiving were separated. It was only via their mental health counselors who were on staff asking the children about their journey. Was it even revealed to them that these children have been separated from their parents? And so, I just, again, there is no low, there is no bottom when it comes to this administration, and so we cannot trust that they won't continue to do similar things in the future.
And can you explain the difference between separated and unaccompanied minors? Maybe Ravi, you want to take that?
Sure. So separated, unaccompanied is the children came up on their own. When I say children, we're talking about from 8 years old up to when an adult, 18 or 21. They made this journey thousands of miles on their own, walking, not knowing what is going to happen tomorrow, going through the uncertainty of violence that is going to affect them.
Right.
And when they came to the border, they will turn themselves in. That is an unaccompanied minor. There are unaccompanied minors who have an adult parent with them, one parent. So that's separate, and that's another category. But there are children who are coming up by themselves. And we should look to really help those children, because I have to go to Queens now, and I have to figure out and plan what I have to do to get to Queens, right? Can you imagine a 1,000-mile journey when you're not sure what is going to happen to you?
Right.
The separated children, on the other hand, is, I just mentioned the parent who came with that child. That is the deliberate act of taking that child away from the parent. So your audience, and many of your audience have mothers and fathers. That's a bad joke, Harvey. But imagine your child are forcibly taken from you,
right,
and you don't know what is going to happen, you know, right, where they are, what is going on. And as we saw, how if they will ever be reunited.
Yeah, I mean, I know last week in the New York Times, there was an article on the 17th of January, which talked about the severe underreporting that we've seen around separated children. So do you think this is a bigger issue that we just don't know enough information about, Christina?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that as far as I understand, when there are hearings in Congress about asking for, specific information and different things like that, the agencies can't provide it. And so to me, that is absolutely outrageous, especially when you think about children are our most vulnerable population in this world.
Right.
They're the ones that we should be looking out for. And so when a federal agency can't tell you how many children died within their custody last year,
right,
can't tell you how many kids haven't been reunited, then there is something fundamentally wrong with the system that is set up to protect children. And so I think that that's why it's even more so important that on a state level, the SCAR Act is passed, because then it creates a level of transparency and accountability.
Do we know if there are actually separated children still in New York State? Ravi, do you know if we have that information?
I don't know. I have the last numbers I checked, there were like a dozen or two, and that was like 2 or 3 months ago. The last person who came to us for help, she was reunited finally with her children, mm-hmm, after weeks of trying to get her children. And an example of what the problems were is that she would submit her fingerprints. I don't know why you have to prove you're the parent,
right,
but she had to submit her fingerprints, and they would keep losing it. And in fact, they told her that if you don't follow our directions, we will keep losing your fingerprints. Mm-hmm. So there's not just, you asked Asina about do we need it? There's deliberate policies by this administration to separate children and to cause harm to those children and to cause harm to the families. So we need to have this act.
Well, Christina, can you tell us what the next step is on the legislation, in the Senate? Or is there planning, if there's co-sponsors of the bill? What's the prospects of the bill passing this year?
I believe that the prospects for the bill passing this year are tremendous and in our favor, just because, as if people don't know, the New York State Senate is now majority Democrat. They have, in the first 2 full weeks of session, have been passing tremendous legislation that is, for me, humane, we the people agenda for the people. And so I believe that when it, just this week, they passed the DREAM Act, which helps provide access to immigrant students. And so I believe that the SCAR Act is right in line with the agenda that the state Senate Democrats are passing. So, and I know that the senator, even last year, spoke with a number of his colleagues about supporting, and they all, many of them became like co-sponsors. I feel like all of them said that they would co-sponsor. So we feel really good about this passing in New York State.
Great. And so I know the faith community has been involved in the SCAR Act. Why has the faith community been such an active participant in this, Ravi, if you can tell us?
Sure. So New Sanctuary is based in the faith community. We started with the faith institutions, and we have broadened the membership to include everyone. So it doesn't matter what your faith is, you
Right.
are part of us.
Right.
But because of our faith, because the basic principle of our scriptures, the family unit. It was a natural act for us to step into this role
Right.
and fight for these children. But aside from that, our role at New Sanctuary is to help non-citizens navigate the removal of the immigration process. The immigration process is so complicated that even the lawyers, you go to law school, NYU or Harvard, you can only specialize in certain aspects of the immigration law.
Right.
And if you try to get involved in anything else, you could cause more harm than ever. So we have been able, and we have been working with people to help them find the resources that is necessary. So when we saw what was happening, we had to get involved. In fact, we went down to the border. We've been doing some work on the border in Tijuana. You've been here. One of the insidious ways that is how you separate children, you have to put your name on a book, right?
Right.
To get a number. Well, they don't just give you a number, they group you in. So if there will be 10 persons to a group for a number. But what they have done, they have actually separated families. So I will be in group 1,
Right.
my child will be in group 5. Mm-hmm. So when my number is called and I have to turn myself in, mm-hmm. My child will still be in a separated. Mm-hmm. So it's about the insidiousness, the evil of how they're doing these things up that is creating problems. Another example of what is going to...
Just if I can
Sure.
just hear that a little more. So you went down the border of the United States and Mexico
Mm-hmm.
just to see what's happening with families that are going on there. So you're saying that Trump administration is continuing a policy of doing whatever they can to either separate families or try to create any methods to return them to whatever alleged country the Trump administration came from?
So yeah, so they will never admit to doing that because the number system is technically held by the refugees themselves. But we all know where the book goes, who calls the books, and all of these things. So there is a sort of a separation there.
Right.
But let's be real. Customs and Border is the one controlling that.
Right.
And we didn't just go down to see what was happening. We actually went down there to meet the people to help them navigate the process. So we were educating them on how their interaction with CBP should be. And when they get released, we were going to help them get to their destination and navigate the process. So we have been doing that. We went down there on December 19th. I personally went to San Diego. I couldn't go to Tijuana. You know why? Because if I cross into Mexico, I will not be able to come back up.
Right.
So I had to do a lot of the work on the San Diego side. What surprised me is I was literally on the wall itself, and I didn't expect to get so close. It was scary because I don't know what was going to happen if somebody literally pushed me across. Right. Exactly. That was it. So the faith leaders my volunteers, the members of New Sanctuary, when they went down there, they were. It was a life-changing moment,
right?
Because they saw all the pain, they saw all the suffering, they saw all the people that were crying out for help, and this administration was refusing that help. We're talking about a border wall. Well, that's not a crisis, because the thousands of people are staying in Tijuana, waiting their turn, right?
Right.
To get in, to be able to talk to CBP. So all of this nonsense about a border wall is just a manufactured crisis.
So you mentioned taking trips down to Tijuana. Can you, if people were wanting to get involved, how could people learn about this and your activities?
So we call this campaign the Sanctuary Caravan. So you just go, we created a website called sanctuarycaravan.org. If you go on that, you can get involved. You can sign up to get emails. You can also sign up to organize locally. So we did not only call for New York, we called for a national, we did a national call to action. So people from all over the country have actually gone down to Tijuana. We had about 1,200 people in the last few weeks.
Right.
When they went down there, they were able to interact, they were able to get involved, they were able to feel the problems that was happening. So you can go on to sanctuarycaravan.org and plug in. We are stepping back for a few weeks because we went down there as triage, right? But you cannot operate on triage. Right. You have to evaluate what you did, because you want to be able to effectively respond.
Right.
What resources you need, who do you need, what is needed, what are the advocacy that you will need to create as a result of what you have learned during that process. So even though we are pausing, please sign up, because we are going to ask for people to go back down or people to locally organize.
And Christina, people are in New York feeling, I know I've heard from a lot of people feeling fairly helpless around this situation and feeling, this is a terrible situation. How can people get involved in SCAR or what you're doing or work that's happening in Albany?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say is that the Senator's office, his in-district office, is located at 1912 Adam Clayton Powell Jr. State Office Building. The office phone number is 212-222-7315. And so if people want to sign a petition, they can definitely reach out to the office in order to do that. I think, I think just from a statewide perspective, encourage your senators, your assembly people, and, the highest levels of elected office in this state to push for the signage of the SCAR Act.
So people can, if they don't live in Senator's district, they should talk to their own representatives of getting involved.
Yeah,
that's great.
Absolutely.
And is there opportunities to travel to Albany? Is there a lobby day coming up on the SCAR Act?
Yeah, we should talk about doing a lobby day. We haven't planned one just yet, but we should do a lobby day for the SCAR Act.
So the other thing I wanted to mention is I would ask everyone to still reach out to the Senator's office and your office, because you're also part of this on the assembly.
Right.
Let you guys know that we want to work with this. Even if I'm in Rochester County, right?
Right.
So you can work on this, saying I am going to organize to support the SCAR Act. Let you know, and then say that we are going to reach out to our elected officials, but also our faith communities.
Right.
And let the faith communities build a team that will apply if their own representative doesn't support it, that they will be able to continue pushing their elected officials to pass the SCAR Act. But keep the state and yourself, the state senator and yourself involved in this process, so we can, if any materials are needed, we can share it with them to help build that momentum.
That's great. And so, we've heard some information from the human services organizations who have some real concerns around the bill. Can you talk about what you're hearing and what obstacles are to getting this passed?
Absolutely. So I do want to say that the human service providers are not our enemy. They are absolutely not our enemy. they are in a tough situation in terms of wanting to provide the best care to the children who are entrusted to them, and we appreciate that and value the service that they bring. But they are in this tough position as it relates to accountability to the federal government. And so what we've heard, you as well, is that from a federal perspective, they can't share this information because it is not legal for them to do so. In terms of their contract, they've said that they would do certain things, and so reporting would take them outside of their contract and make them liable, and then they would lose federal contracts that they need. And then also they said it's not that we want children to be separated or to be far from their caregivers, but we feel like we provide the best care. So we don't want New York to be a state where the federal government does not send children. It sends them somewhere else where they don't receive the best care. So that's what we've heard.
And so how do you respond to those concerns, and ensuring that we want accountability, but just hearing their concerns as, as legitimate from their perspective?
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that they're legitimate. And so what I will say is that you and the senator were very thoughtful when it came to writing this legislation, making sure that the legislation did not conflict with federal statutes, with federal laws and different things like that. So that's always been a concern from the very beginning, making sure that the nonprofit providers in this state are not operating in an illegal manner in order to abide by the SCAR Act. And so we're continuing to figure out if there are inconsistencies between the SCAR Act and federal legislation. Let's modify those, but we absolutely are not going to walk away from the responsibility that the state has to these children, making sure that there is transparency and making sure that children are reunified.
And so on the ground with families that you've spoken to, Ravi, who've had their children separated or been reunified, what are the ongoing struggles that they have, what are the issues that they're experiencing that New Yorkers should know about, and how New Yorkers can be helpful? So
the way that they actually are being asked to reunite with their children, I give the example of the fingerprints being lost, the threats that are being thrown to the parents, and these parents themselves are also facing the same crisis of deportation.
Right.
So the fear that they instill in the parents is very tangible.
So you're asking people who are at risk of being deported to get fingerprinted by the federal government, that the same government is trying to deport them?
Correct. And in addition to that, we have also had reports of those families who submit their fingerprints are being picked up by ICE. So it is not a fear that is unreasonable.
Yeah. Can you explain what ICE is for some of our viewers who may not know what ICE is and being picked up? Explain that a little.
Sure. ICE means Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They are the enforcement arm of the Department of Homeland Security. That their job is to deport people. It doesn't matter if someone has been here for 20 years, 30 years. If you don't have the proper documentation, they will put you in removal proceedings, and they will be the one who will take you away. So when I say pick up, it means that they will come to my home, they will arrest me, and they will put me in. They will either detain me or put me in through the court proceedings to justify their removal of me from my separation from my family.
And Christine, what we've seen in the last 2 years, and since this new administration, and changes in ICE and behavior, what have you seen in your community in Harlem, and has there been a increased fear or concerns around ICE and ICE pickups? Yeah,
absolutely. And so I know that the senator, he actually did a town hall in conjunction with Councilwoman Diana Ayala around the public charge rule. And so if people don't know what the public charge rule, it would modify federal regulation in terms of basically if you are poor, it would make you more susceptible to deportations, and so that's just criminal in and of itself. The public charge rule, as the Trump administration is trying to advance it, criminalizes poverty, criminalizes particularly people of color who are poor, who are migrants, who are immigrants, and so we're seeing just within the city itself. immigrants who contribute to the economy, who work here, who serve here, who are our neighbors, a heightened level of fear and a heightened level of not being full citizens within our state in terms of being able to access, the various resources that they need in order to live, such as food stamps and other things. And so I think it's contributing to hunger. I think it's contributing to homelessness. It's contributing to stress and mental health issues and different things like that. So.
Well,
including medical. So they're afraid to go to the hospitals. They're afraid to to take care of themselves, and that's why when someone does end up in a hospital, it's much more serious because you couldn't deal with it in the beginning. The children who are U.S. citizens, the parents are not able to give them the insurance, and because they're afraid this will impact their future to access immigration benefits.
And besides SCAR, what else can New York City and New York State do to protect these vulnerable populations? Are there other things on the ground that we're seeing that would be really helpful?
So one of the main things that people can start that the state can do, and I'm looking at you, Assemblyman Epstein and State Senator Benjamin, that you can pass the driver's license.
Right.
Because a lot of people, especially upstate, when I say upstate, I do mean upstate, but anywhere from past the Bronx, you need to drive to get to anywhere.
Can you explain the driver's license issue for some of our viewers may not know what you're talking about?
So if to get undocumented people are not able to get a license because you need identification requirements. Even though that identification requirement can still be supplied by someone who is not a citizen, they have taken away they've taken away certain documentation to be able to access that driver's license.
Right. So for folks who are viewers in New York City, we have NYC ID.
Correct.
So for people who aren't documented, or even myself, I have an NYC ID. But outside of the city, that's a much more complicated issue, right?
It's
for
much
ID.
more complicated, but it's not just about the ID. New York City, fortunately, has the subways. But if you're up in Rochester, for you to even take your child to school, if the bus breaks down, the school bus, you have to drive to the school.
Right.
So people, or if there's an emergency, a medical emergency, for instance, you have to drive. So a lot of people are being picked up because of because they are profiled,
right,
and because they don't have the license, they are now arrested, and then end up in immigration.
I think we probably have just time for one or two more questions. I know you mentioned people having legal help. Are there other financial support that the state could provide, Christina, for these families? I know last year we put the Liberty Fund together on the state government. Is that enough? Is there more we can do to help undocumented citizens or separated families?
Absolutely. So I know that when we met, your team organized a meeting with the nonprofit providers to say, what do you need? And so a lot of them said that the aftercare services for migrant children is needed in terms of being able to, make sure that they have what they need in order to live and to thrive. So I think from a state perspective, we need to make sure from a human services perspective, from a foster care perspective and different things like that, we're making sure that we're providing the necessary funding for children.
Right. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, so I know it went by quickly. But that's all the time we have. I wanted to really thank my guests for being here, and thank you for watching this edition of Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Thank you, and have a good day.